you, students. It's another outreach session today with myself, Louise, your residence outreach. Can't even say my title now. So, a residence outreach worker. And today I'm joined by Jamie Meldrum, who is a wellness coach on the Durham College side of the house. And yeah, Jamie and I are going to dive into all things, mental health, wellness, what's available, what is coaching, right? It's a fair question that students, you may approach with or want to know more. So we're going to dig deeper into all of that stuff today. Jamie and I are team members, but being, Jamie, there's a lot of parts of the work that you do that I could stand to learn from, right? I mean, we have such differing roles that I'm really excited to learn more today as well, to be honest, about what you offer, what we've got going on. So welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Louise. I too am looking forward to sharing about coaching because, like you said, so many students are, I find, still really unaware of, that we even exist and that we're a service on campus, let alone what we do. And I always kind of find it funny because sometimes I'll be in a session with a student, and maybe they'll like take a call, like, oh, I'm with my counselor. I'm like, I'm not your counselor, I'm a coach. And then, even having gone through and explained already kind of the differences. But yeah, I would love to kind of share and maybe educate people about, what I do, what coaching is, and how myself or the other wellness coach, Lucy, might be able to help and support students.
Well, let's dive in. So start off with just telling the students exactly like who you are, how long have you been at the college, your background, anything you feel like, is relevant and comfortable to share.
For sure. So as a coach, I have a PCC designation with the ICF, and a lot of people are really unfamiliar with coaching acronyms. And so PCC is Professional Certified Coach, which means I have over 500 hours coaching experience plus 150 coach training experience hours. And what the ICF is the International Coach Federation. So what is similar between coaches and say nurses, doctors, social workers is that we do have this sort of governing body. And I say governing for a reason, because there is a code of ethics. There's a certain set of standards, again, certain of hours, a certain amount of training that we need to go to apply for and then be, awarded or rewarded with this designation. What's different about coaching, what can be important to kind of distinguish here is that, we're not a regulated profession. And so, Louise, you could right now be like, I'm a coach, and there's nobody to say that you're not. Whereas, you and I can't say, I can't say I'm a psychotherapist. Like we can't say we're doctors or dentists because, again, there's these colleges that are regulatory bodies. So coaching has like a governing body, but no regulatory body. And that's one of the big differences between, say, psychotherapy and counseling, even in coaching.
Fair enough. And so how did you sort of, what brought you to coaching? What was the draw or the appeal, or how is that, I was going to say unraveled. That's clearly not the right word to use it. How has that developed for you? What's that journey been like?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And so, a long story short, a educational background in social service worker. I got my diploma from Centennial College after realizing I wanted to help people. And that is kind of what I decided to do way back in 2008. Ended up getting my social work degree from Ryerson about 7 years later, worked at Canadian Mental Health Association in various departments as a case manager, both in like a residential setting and then in like as a community support, or part of a community support team. And from there, I was kind of feeling not totally fulfilled at my job at the time, thinking and feeling I wanted more. And I actually had a former colleague of ours tell me about this wellness coaching position, and I learned a little bit about it, and sounded awesome. It sounded incredible, actually. And a lot of what I was already doing as a case manager, as within my own style of doing it, was a lot of, or really was in alignment with the coaching principles and coaching approaches to supporting people. So I applied, and that's kind of the long story. I got the job, and I'm proud to be a part of our interdisciplinary team on the Campus Health and Wellness Center. Again, and there's another wellness coach, Lucy, and that we're here to support students. And that's kind of the journey.
Yeah. And so what, you know, what was the sort of foundation for wellness coaching here on campus? And walk us through, how long has this been, a service that's offered? What changes have you maybe seen since you've joined the team and taken on this role? Kind of walk us through that.
So coaching is relatively new at the college. I think it's been around for maybe 4 or 5 years, and I've been at DC for just over two, maybe 2.5. And so I joined when it was already established, but again, kind of recently established. But I was under the impression or under this understanding that there was someone identified a bit of a gap where we had great mental health services, but mental health is more than just say like a diagnosis and medication and managing symptoms. You can look at mental health or even wellness on a spectrum, right? So I think people realize that wellness can be a focus, and not just how to manage and how to get by, but how to thrive, how to really succeed, how to make the most out of your experience as a student. And for sure, there's a lot of complementary services already at DC, but I think the idea of coaching very specifically, there is a saying in coaching, we try and help people be the best versions of themselves. That's a common thing coaches say that they try and do. And whether their clients are executives, or maybe they're students, or maybe they're parents, and there's all sorts of niches within coaching. So I just think there was maybe a realization that in terms of wellness and thriving and success, there is a potential opportunity there, and I believe that's how it came about. In terms of what changes I've seen since I've been here, we have a peer wellness coaching program, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
We train these peer wellness coaches who are actually DC students, volunteering their time and supporting other students in a role that helps students struggling with like time management, organization, creating structure. So we are continuing to not only implement and develop that, but evolve it into some things. And I have some plans in place, but coaching is really, I think, starting to take off, especially when we were in the Wellbeing Center for a little while. More and more students were visiting there, finding out who we were, what we did, and now we're doing virtual class visits. That's just my name for them, where teachers will want us to come in and say, what are the services available, and I'll talk about the psychotherapists, the residents outreach, the mental health, nursing, and wellness coaches too, of course. And just as a way to share the awesome news and work that we all do under the Campus Health and Wellness Center.
Yeah. And I mean, so what I take from that is, and I love that angle of it, right? Where it's like mental health, mental wellness doesn't mean we don't sometimes need that additional support or someone to sort of bounce our goals off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can be mentally well and still greatly struggle with planning my day, and that can lead to the procrastination, which leads to the frustration and the guilt, the shame, all those things, right?
Exactly.
So it sounds like wellness coaching in that nutshell is sort of like for the mentally, well and whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking to, sort of like take that a little bit further and build off of that. Is that sort of, am I right in saying that?
I would, absolutely. And, I think all coaches, again, because we're not a regulated profession, meaning, there's not that governing college regulatory college. But all coaches really should be trained to know and identify when things are coaching appropriate to when things are, say, more appropriate for requiring therapy. In coaching, we can explore, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, even in depth. But there is a certain point where if things are too intense, if they've been, maybe if they kind of originated through a lot of trauma and they're struggling with these things, coaches should really realize what that line in the sand is between how they can help as a coach, but not trying to be that counselor, and doing our due diligence to really support people as best as possible by making that necessary referral. And I mean, at DC, that could be to a psychotherapist. It could be one of our mental health nurses. It could be one of our physicians who could then refer to our consulting psychiatrist. And that is part of what I love about our department, is that we have these interdisciplinary roles, providers, and yeah, we have a pretty comprehensive and robust, I would even say, support for students' mental health and wellness.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And I mean it, and I think important for students to know, if you're accessing one type of support, it doesn't mean that you can't access another, right? If it's
Right.
coaching paired with working with one of the therapists on campus or one of the mental health nurses, etc., like there's no there, because we're complex and unique, and so are our solutions, right? It's what works
Mm.
for us, and that can look different day to day. And so Jamie, what are some things that might be, um, really great to dive into through coaching, or what might be some times or things where you might feel like, okay, I might refer away for that, but we can work over here on this. Like what, just to give students sort of a visual on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say a lot of really coaching appropriate things, first and foremost, would be, if a student has a certain goal or objective in their academics, in life, in a relationship, in a career, and they really don't know what they should do. Maybe there's a decision that they have to make. So we really help students get clear on what they want, what's getting in the way, what their strengths and assets are, what might be some barriers and some challenges, and maybe areas that they want to improve on to really get them from A to B. And to distinguish, and maybe another distinguishing factor between coaching and counseling is that coaching is very much looking at what's happening like here and now in forward focus. So it's based on like movement and progress. And, that's not always for everyone. And sometimes that's actually a critique of coaching, is that, it's not always for people who aren't, for people who don't necessarily have their mental health fully in check, right? And maybe they're struggling and working on that. So coaching might not be the most appropriate, and some people critique that, and that's okay. But coaching really, at its core, can really be really effective at helping people just get from A to B,
Yeah.
and along the way in our conversations, it's looking at, as a coach, we practice active listening, as I know you do, and an integral part of therapy and counseling and all those things. And, we can help people identify underlying or limiting beliefs and certain perspectives that they might not realize that they have, or maybe certain expectations that they have of themselves, that other people have of them, right? Because a lot of times tradition and culture and family plays a big part in, and sometimes it just takes that person to listen and be like, I'm kind of picking up on this. Like, what do you think about this idea? As I say this back to you, like, what stands out for you? Like, what does this mean to you? And so it's really helping students a lot of times, is getting really, really clear on what's important to them. And that importance could be, again, a goal, an objective, something that's wrong, something that they want to do. It could be a whole bunch of different things. To mention or to touch on when we might need to refer is, if we are going into like certain beliefs and certain emotions that are coming up for students when they're talking about things, if it's really impacting, say, like their sleep, their eating, their relationships, maybe they're failing out of classes. And again, if a lot of it came from past trauma and violence and abuse, and all these things that, unfortunately, a lot of people experience and go through in their lives, and maybe haven't had enough time or the right opportunities to try to talk to someone to work through them, that's when the coach will say, hey, I'm kind of noticing these things. I really think that a therapist would be either the best support for you right now, and then you can come back to coaching, or it's sometimes very appropriate to have a sort of complementary service where a therapist can work on some things and the coach can help them, again, thrive at school while they're getting support for some, maybe potentially heavy or difficult emotional, behavioral, and sort of cognitive things.
Yeah, because I could see how, yeah, I mean, some things pop up as symptoms, right? Like perhaps my procrastination, for example, is a symptom of something deeper, but I can do the work on both, simultaneously recognizing, what is procrastination? How can I manage that? And then fundamentally, where is it coming from? And that's, the different type of work that I'd maybe dive into, right?
Yeah.
And so with coaching, like, is there ever a time where if you've got the sense that a student, say, you're working on something and you think, you know, maybe there's that conversation, maybe you could benefit from doing some deeper work, but the student doesn't feel that readiness for change or isn't comfortable pursuing that, would you keep on doing the, you know, the coaching work with that student, or how does that work?
Great question, Louise. And so the short answer is, I would have to say no. At a certain point, it's almost like that old figure of speech. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like I can't force. And part of coaching too, it's more about me asking the right creative, thought-provoking questions rather than saying, do this, don't do that, this is what's going to get you to from A to B. It's a lot of encouraging reflection and insight and awareness for students to make their own decisions. And so, you know, if someone is struggling with motivation or discipline and really just not feeling stuck, you know, I'll do everything that I know how to do. But if at a certain point, there's not much movement forward, you know, again, it might be a referral to a counselor, or, you know, if they're not ready to work, you know, coaching is meant, there's meant to be an objective. Like, you know, we're not just meant to be like a sounding board or someone to vent to. It can definitely be a part of a session. Absolutely. Because, you know, those things can be very, very important for people's mental health and wellness. But if that's what it's really kind of solely focusing on, is like just venting and really just kind of like, oh, I don't really know. And, you know, I've been thinking about this for a year and I can't seem to move forward. Then sometimes it's an honest conversation. Like, okay, well, how bad do you actually want this thing? And like, well, if you're not doing these things, then like, really, really what is going on here? And so, and then you kind of let the student decide, but at the same time, yeah, if I feel like I've done what I can, I'll just say, you know, I feel like, you know, I've offered everything that I can. And believe me, we try. I'm like you, you know, we do everything that we can, right? But no, and it's not too often, but that it does come up sometimes. So that's kind of how that plays out sometimes.
Yeah, and I get that. It's for the greater good. And I think what you're talking about is, you know, boundaries for everybody, and keeping that in check, right? And making sure that relationships go both ways. They have to work for everybody, and sometimes those are hard pills to swallow for all of us, right? But have to be swallowed nonetheless. And so I really appreciate the honesty there with that answer, and with the work that you're doing, is that you're bringing that honesty and those boundaries and that realism to the role, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. And again, I think that's kind of something we all share, you know, within our, you know, team at the Campus Health and Wellness Center. You know, we have to be consistent with the boundaries too, right? And because if we don't, it's yeah, I mean, it's just not a good thing. You know, you have to know what's appropriate for you fulfilling our duties and responsibilities and what's expected of us, right? And, you know, if those boundaries start to be really flexed and become really loose, kind of just asking for trouble at that point. So better just to be consistent. But I mean, when you, after some practice and maybe in the field for a little while, like you learn to communicate those boundaries in a very, you know, kind, polite, professional way, so that, you know, people aren't taking things personally. And it's more about, you know, the service and support provider than it is, say, about the student and them, you know, being about them and it being sort of something to be taken personally.
Yeah, I'd agree. And all part of growth, right? Growth can be extremely painful, no matter how positive, right? I want to go back to goals for a second, because I know that foundationally for coaching, it's goal focused, right? So what if a student comes in and has two very different goals? How would that be managed within our services?
Yeah, no, another awesome question. So what's unique to, maybe not unique, but in a more kind of structured coaching session, and I say structured because the ICF, the International Coach Federation that I mentioned earlier, they have a certain structure or approach to coaching. And that is what Lucy and I, that is kind of our approach for the most part. And so so you always identify a topic and what the goal is, and things like, okay, well, how will you know that you've had a successful session today? How will you know that you have the right goal for you and what you need right now? You know, what might change for you now that we've had these conversations. And so when there's multiple goals or multiple things that they might want to talk about, it's okay, well, what's most important to you right now? And then sometimes we ask questions to really help them identify what the priority is. Because, you know, let's be honest, a lot of times we have competing priorities in life. And so, and sometimes they really seem like everything's important. So it's like, okay, well, what do you want to focus on today? Like, what do you think would be most helpful today? Because when you start getting into talking a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and on these tangents, you know, those initial questions at the beginning of the session, like, you know, what do you want to get out of today? It's kind of hard to really, you know, focus on achieving that outcome, or, you know, getting what the student wants out of the session. And I should reiterate that it's the students deciding these things. It's the students answering what they want to focus on. It's not up to me, even if it's at a follow-up session. Like, you know, I'll say, you know, we talked about this last week, but, you know, what are we talking about this week? So it's always, the student's always in the driver's seat, which is kind of a nice thing for coaching. But it's really, just kind of prioritizing what's most important today. You know, what do you want to get out of the session? How are we going to know we're successful? And then we kind of check in at the end of the session and be like, you know, what are your takeaways? How are you feeling about your progress towards the goal that you wanted to work towards, or, you know, this decision that you wanted to make? And that's, then that's kind of how we evaluate the session.
So can a goal be something that carries over several sessions, and some goals might be something that a student feels, you know, is like done and dusted within one session? And what's that like?
Yeah, it's both. Some students come to us and it's like a one and done. They get what they need, and, you know, and it's like no news is good news, and they're off and they're, you know, thriving, and they're being, you know, they're doing well. Other times, goals and priorities change. You know, life happens. Maybe something outside of school, you know, kind of gets in the way, or throws a curveball, or life throws you a curveball, and so we adapt, and we roll with, again, whatever is kind of the main focus for the student at that time. And so I just lost my train of thought. But I completely lost my train of thought there.
It's the worst feeling in the world. So we were kind of on that, like the difference between, you know, that, so it can be that single session goal completed, and then can it be something if a student says like, hey, listen, I want to work on this for like 8 sessions or 6 sessions, or like, is there a limit, or can that work?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So one of the nice things with coaching right now, anyways, is we can be a continued support for students throughout their time at DC. So we'll usually book once every 2 to 3 weeks, or sometimes maybe even weekly at the very beginning for a couple of weeks, just to get a feel for what coaching is, to get started on an action plan, on, again, getting clear on what the goals and priorities and what the things that they really need to work on and focus on. And then from there, again, maybe start spreading them out. Sometimes I have some students who will do like almost monthly check-ins at this point to check in on like accountability. So, you know, they'll determine, you know, I want to work on these things the next couple of weeks or a few weeks, and then we'll come back 3-4 weeks later, like, you know, how are things going? What's worked well? What's maybe hasn't worked well? What do we need to try to adjust or change for you to get the results and changes that you want? So it can be really flexible, I think, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And in terms of goals changing, another thing too, you know, students can definitely have those things that they want to focus on and prioritize. But when we do ask questions, sometimes, you know, just naturally they can be profound, deeper questions. And then students are, I don't know, I'm so sorry. It's like, no, don't be sorry. Like, that be reflect on that, like maybe that's a good thing sometimes, is when they don't know the answers and they have time, they can take that away from the session and really, I mean, they can meditate on it, they can just think about it, they can journal and all these things, and come back to the next session maybe with a little more awareness or a little more insight or idea as to, you know, what is at the depth or core of that topic or issue.
Yeah, like it really is leave no stone unturned, right? I mean, anything's up for, you know, anything's on the coaching table, essentially, it sounds like, right? And then the beauty of it is, our team being what it is that if any of us feel like this is outside of my wheelhouse, or oftentimes we're moving things around to each other, right, that the student's in good hands, that, you know, we'll try to gently overturn those stones with you, you know, they're not alone. And so Are students, like, given that everything is online right now, are students able to stick with you throughout their entire, say, diploma program, if that's, or is that not sort of typically what you see? Like, in terms of duration, is there a max? Is there a cutoff?
Uh, Formally, no. I mean, I think I mean, a similarity again between coaching and counseling, for instance, is, eventually things are meant, we want people to get to where they want to be.
Yeah,
So in therapy, that's, maybe you could say, to get better, to get more healthy, to move through and past trauma and emotional things, and in behavioral changes. And coaching, it's, working towards goals. So, kind of informally, the goal is to taper off and to like spread your wings and fly and succeed. And again, maybe at that point, maybe it's a check-in once a month or once every 2 months. And so yeah, I mean, on paper, I don't think it's so formal that it's this many sessions, but at the same time, uh, there's meant to be progress. And then if I'm not, and it's not that that's up to me, there's obviously a lot of input from students. And if students are feeling and saying, no, I'm seeing progress, I mean, a lot of times I would agree and see that as well. And in terms of, insight and reflection and movement towards what they want to do. But that being said, if there seems to be stagnation and not a lot of movement, there's a conversation about that. So I'd say it all depends. There's definitely students who I've supported over like a semester and a half or 2 semesters, about a year. And some are one and done. So yeah, it can be a pretty broad spectrum. It just depends on their needs and how it goes.
yeah, and I think like the beauty of the goal focus, right? That's sort of like the parameters, and then it sounds like, the work that you're doing is helping students figure out, what do these parameters need to look like to reach and set goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like you've got this roadmap to work towards it together, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's where the initial part of the session, which is kind of like, getting clear on what the goal is, and maybe like, how will we know that you've gotten to where you want to be. That can be also really important.
Yeah,
Not just for that individual session, but overall. Okay, well, it's like, a month ago, we started talking about this. Where are you feeling at now? And similar to other, providers and professionals, it's like, we have a saying in coaching, you don't coach the issue or the problem, you coach the person. So you would always check back, but like, I remember, like, this is where you were at with this a month ago. Where are you at now with it? So you always give the opportunity to the student to kind of almost like benchmark or judge their own progress. And yeah, that it's kind of a neat way of seeing how things are evolving.
yeah, and I love it because I mean, not everything needs, the deep dive of, say, counseling, psychotherapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we just need to, like you say, choose that goal and figure out how can I work towards it. I mean, it's a skill in itself, isn't it? Like, goal setting can be something that we're not always, we come by it naturally throughout the academic system, but we may not feel confident or that we really know what we're doing with that, right?
For sure. And there's so many things that can really complicate even simple goals, imposter syndrome, expectations,
Yes.
time management, like all these things, right? And so a lot of times we don't even know, like, this is what's happening. And so again, having, similar training between, coaches and counselors and just experience and having that time sitting with students, you pick up on these things and you help raise awareness of these things, like, like, and then when students maybe start to understand themselves better and how they think and how they respond or react to things, it's like, then you can really start making changes, and they can start making changes towards the things that they want to change or improve. So
Yeah.
it's that, and that's that active listening component, or big piece is that active listening component, to like read between the lines,
Mhm.
hear what's not being said, all
Yes.
those kinds of good things.
I love that. And I love that you brought up imposter syndrome, because I feel like I know I can speak from my own personal experience, going from student to worker, um, graduating programs, that was always something that heavily stuck with me, right? And
Mm,
so for our students that are going to watch this later on, imposter syndrome being you sort of now got this title or this role or this diploma or degree or whatever the case may be, but feeling like you don't quite live up to it, or like someone shouldn't have really given me this. I didn't earn it or deserve it, which you did. But it's sort of that transitionary phase, right? Like I love that you touched on that, because I would imagine, even students leaving to go for placement, or maybe even just choosing a placement, like, oh, I don't feel like I'm good enough to choose that place, or right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just a massive part of, and I think, and professionally, have you ever gone through that experience with like that imposter?
I was just going to share, yeah. And it's funny because just recently, and I don't know if it's because it's like exposure therapy, and I like public speaking and presenting is something that part of me really likes doing. And then like the day before, I'm like what, whose idea was this? Like, what was I thinking?
Yeah,
that
totally.
I was able to talk to and present on this subject. And so I really struggled with that, where I, wouldn't lose sleep. I would lose sleep. My stomach would be in knots. I couldn't eat before, and all these things. And it's like, who are you to be talking to other people about this stuff? It's like, what do you know? And then, right. So it's like the worst possible kinds of imposter syndrome. But I think just through, almost like I kind of forced myself just to do it, because I knew it was something that I would benefit and grow from, even though it was super uncomfortable. So I found that that's, at least one area of my life that I really challenged myself. And again, just recently, I'm really feeling like I'm settling into doing things like this. Like 3 months ago, I would have been super nervous and like, what am I going to talk about? What kind of coach am I? Whatever. But then at the end of the day, and through reflecting, it's like, no, like I know what I'm talking about. I can offer valuable things to people, and that's slowly starting to settle in more and more every day, perhaps. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like the authentic lived experience. Like, we're human too. We're part of the health team, but never at any time are we feeling like we are the experts, right? Like you say, coaching, especially student driven, students are driving the goals. We're there to support, and we're staying in our lanes and walking that walk with them. But the human experience is not foreign to us either, right?
Exactly. And that's why I like to start talking about imposter syndrome, because it's like, I truly, know it for me, so I'm not just like reading about what it is. It's like, I've experienced that. Like, you can get through it. This is at least my journey. And now let's look at, how you can get through it on your journey.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just mindful of time today and your time.
Yeah.
Two last things I wanted to touch on, because I think our students would be interested in, I would be if I was a student, the peer support program. Given that we're in a pandemic, everything's online, are there still opportunities for students within the peer support program?
Yeah. So it used to be called peer coaching. It's now peer wellness coaching, but there are opportunities. So they can just reach out to me directly, peer coaching at durhamcollege.ca, or they can also call the Campus Health and Wellness Center, 905-721-3037. And same thing, if they want to get connected to a wellness coach, they can, they could email peer coaching, but we also have wellness coaching at durhamcollege.ca. Or, similarly, just call our main line at the Campus Health and Wellness Center, say that, they want to talk with a coach, and, one of the clerks will start the process.
That's perfect. That is awesome. Given that I don't know if you heard that call coming in, I just hung up on our boss.
She'll understand. She's good that way. Yeah.
She'll understand. So I will. Poor Darlene. Okay, so I'm going to leave us here. I am so grateful for you coming out today, Jamie. That was amazing. Anytime you want to come back and we can dive deeper, please let me know. And for any students that want to reach out to know more, Jamie and Lucy are our wellness coaches on campus on the DC side. They're happy to help. You guys are running virtually, so still accessible.
Virtual, telephone, yep.
Yeah. And so they're happy to walk you through. So Jamie, thank you so much again, and we will talk soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks so much, Louise.
Okay, bye.
Bye for now.